Chapter 9. Singapore at Peace, May to June 1941. HM Dockyard, Singapore, Thursday the 15th of May. My darling, here I am safely installed at last and very glad to have arrived. I am sending this by airmail via America, which line has just started, partly to give you as early news as possible of my first reactions, and partly because there are 2 points I want to discuss quickly. I'll take them first. To start with, there is the question of money. I shall find it quite impossible to live on my pay, even if I economize as much as I can, and I shall have to sell out some of my capital straight away, because I have quite a lot of initial outlay here. I've got to buy a motor car, which is essential, even to get to my office. And I've got to get linen, which is not supplied, and quite a lot of clothes. Because of that, I have got the bank to cable Barclays to remit £200 straight away. Will you please get in touch with Barclays and confirm that, and then sell out what is necessary to pay that, and at the same time to pay off your and my overdrafts, and we'll start afresh. Assuming the captain of the dockyard's office was in the administration block on Office Road, inside the dockyard perimeter fence, as shown on the 1968 plan of the naval base, the distance from home to work must have been about 3/4 of a mile. That is the most unpleasant point. The second is that there is a very great likelihood that wives may soon be allowed out here again. The lifting of this ban may, however, not include children. I shall cable you as soon as I know anything definite, and please, please come. I'm fairly confident you would be allowed to bring Jonathan, otherwise I know you wouldn't consider it. But will you please just think about the possibility of leaving Jeremy and Jane? I shall, of course, try my very hardest to get permission to have you all out here, and then I must leave it to you to decide about Jeremy. If I cable asking you to come and bring Jonathan only, or bring Jane and Jonathan, it will mean that the others are not allowed. Now for the news. We arrived yesterday and I was met and driven out here by Love Band. He has sold his car for £200, which gives you some idea of the cost of second-hand cars. The house is even better than I had imagined, even in my wildest dreams. It's lovely, but so large, and so empty, and I shall think the whole time of you and the children peopling the rooms. It is set on rough cast stone pillars, with only a hall on the ground floor, and everything else a first-floor bungalow. In the centre, an enormous lounge-cum-sitting room coming out above the front porch, and open on 3 sides to the air. Behind this, the dining room smallish in comparison, but square and capable of dining 12 easily. Jutting out are 2 wings, the east comprising 1 double and 1 single bedroom, one of which is furnished as a study, and 2 bedrooms. The west comprising 1 double and 1 single bedrooms and 1 bathroom. The kitchen fits in somewhere between the dining room and the east wing, and a covered way leads from there to the servants' house at the back. I at present have 2 boys, 1 cook, 1 chauffeur, 1 washamar, 1 gardener, and 1 gardener's boy. The garden consists of, I should think, about 2 acres of grass, including a tennis court, interspersed with various lovely flowering shrubs and several beds of those lovely big flowers which are a sort of cross between gladioli and flag irises, cannas, and of many colours, all gaudy. The garden, if anything, is lovelier than the house, but I shall have to find out the name of some of the things before I tell you more about it. There are a few bougainvillea, some pawpaw and banana trees, and several different kinds of orchid, and a thing rather like wisteria, only pink, covering the front of the house. Then there is a Siamese cat left by the Brownriggs, and I think that completes the mere list. The furniture is most tasteful, although it is service, and is all of a lightish colour. There is also an Amma's room under the west wing, and I think a garage under the east. I've just discovered that the kitchen is in the servants' quarters and a pantry only at P. The reference to wisteria will have been very significant to both Kenneth and Molly because of the prolific wisteria growing over the west-facing walls of Lumley Croft, including the sunny corner. It sounds idyllic and reminiscent of a small version of the magnificent present-day botanical gardens. Indeed, in reporting on morale at the base on the 20th of January 1942, the chaplain, the Reverend F. L. Pocock, wrote, "This place is delightfully laid out as a garden. It is a pity it was not designed for purposes of war." This was the first of 69 carefully numbered letters that Kenneth wrote to Molly over the next few months. All but one of the series has survived. Because of the time delay between writing and receiving answers, there is a certain pathetic irony, as well as repetition in many of them, particularly in Kenneth's hopes that Molly and family will be allowed to join him. The next day, the 16th of May, was Molly's 33rd birthday, and Kenneth wrote with his best wishes, though it would have been many weeks later that Molly received them. "Many happy returns of the day, darling. I wonder where you're spending this birthday, and if you'll be out here for the next one. I sincerely hope so." Chevalier and Mrs. came up to see me the evening of my arrival. They live very close, and there is actually a gap in the hedge of my garden in the northeast corner which leads into his garden. Their baby daughter, aged 1½ now I think, is very sweet, but very small and pale. They are having another baby sometime this summer. Mrs. Chevy has promised to take some photos of the house for me to send to you. I'm sorry to say I'm just waiting to see the doctor, as I had a very bad tummy yesterday and a temperature all night. I feel miserable, but a little better this morning. The baby daughter mentioned was Felicity, known at first as Felicity Jane. From the way Kenneth refers to them formally, I deduce that Molly didn't know the family as well as Kenneth did, nor as Molly came to know them after the war when they lived not far from us and were a great support to her, as she was to various members of their family. Chevy's appointment in Singapore was as Assistant King's Harbour Master and Assistant Commander of the Dockyard, ACD, very much Kenneth's right-hand man, having been in the post since August 1938. Kenneth's letter of the 16th of May 1941 continued. "I'm finishing this in bed as the doctor has advised me to retire. It's a very unfortunate start, especially as Love Band is giving a cocktail party to 150 people to meet me this evening. Everyone in our ship coming out suffered from tummy trouble at one time or another, and we had quite a serious outbreak the last week, but I thought I was going to be one of the very few to escape. I saw the Admiral yesterday, and have been asked to share the house with Captain Harkness until such time as wives are again allowed out. Naturally, I jumped at the suggestion, as it will halve the expenses very nearly, and in any case I couldn't have stood living alone in this barracks for very long. He is the man who brought his wife out and had to send her on to Australia. I know him slightly and like him. I have just had a letter written from you on the day after I joined the ship. I imagine we brought it out with us. Anyhow, it was lovely to get it, and most encouraging to hear you're not downhearted, darling. I don't know what I should do without your courage. I have very little myself, and sometimes feel like giving up if it wasn't for you. I know we shall all be together again after the war, and that makes life worth living. I shan't normally write by this airmail because I believe it's very expensive, but I think we might afford it once a month, don't you? God bless you, my sweetheart. I'm thinking of you all the time. Give my love to the children, and I'll write as soon as I'm better. All my love, darling. Kenneth. P.S. I have just heard that this airmail via USA only goes once a fortnight, and the next one leaves May 26th, so I shall leave this until then. Next day, 17th of May, in a letter to Violet in Tanganyika, he gives a similar description of the house, but adds that the lounge cum sitting room, which is really a large extension of the veranda which goes all round the house, took a cocktail party of 100 to 120 with the greatest of comfort last night. The party was supposed to be to meet me, so I had to get off my bed of sickness and try to be polite for about an hour, feeling like death the whole time. The same day he wrote again to Molly, airmail via Durban that was leaving in 2 days' time. I arrived 3 days ago, and yesterday I finished a letter to you, 11, which I am sending by airmail via USA, which route is, I believe, very much quicker than others. Unfortunately, it doesn't leave here till May 26th, so I'm sending this one by airmail via Durban, which leaves in 2 days' time, but which is reputed to take at least 6 weeks. Will you please let me know how long they do take, and then I'll always send one letter each month by the quickest route. I need hardly say it is pouring with rain. I should think it has rained more in this last 48 hours than it usually rains in England in 6 months. I believe this is, if anything, the worst time of year in Singapore, but for rain it doesn't really vary very much. In case my letter via USA hasn't arrived, I'd better repeat the gist of it. Firstly, the pay problem here is worse than ever I expected. In a year's time, when I am paying income tax on my full captain's pay and allowances, we are always a year behind in income tax. Luckily, my monthly pay will be about £158, less about £65 income tax, which brings it to £93. Of that, I send £60 to you and £5 to Jeeves. Assuming I stop paying Jeeves, that leaves me £33 a month out here to live on. Loveband considers it costs him £50 a month in the house alone. Servants come to about £20, and outside that, of course, is the cost of the car and upkeep, clothes, games and amusements. Well, obviously, it is impossible. At present, the income tax situation makes it just possible, and it is being relieved also by my sharing the house with Captain Harkness, which nearly halves the internal expenses. Next year, if you haven't come out by then, I can only imagine I shall have to resign. However, there's a long time before then. In the meantime, I have called Barclays to send £200 to my account in Singapore to allow me to buy a car. I think I have found one for about £76. The cost of second-hand cars is prohibitive. Austin 7, Morris 8, of about 5 years old, costing between £95 and £110, and to buy the essentials of linen, etc., which are not supplied. Will you please contact Barclays and sell out sufficient of my capital to pay off that £200 and our overdrafts? My only companion is a Siamese cat left by the Brownriggs, and I need you terribly badly, darling. I expect I shall get less lonely if I know you can't come out, and shan't be quite so miserable, and I'll try, like you, to keep my courage up, and just wait for the end of the 2 years. Chevalier and his ma-in-law were at the cocktail party. Mrs. C is having another baby in a few months, so doesn't go to these parties. There were several other people I knew. Harry Reed, the Brownfields, Mrs. Bridge of Nav School, whose husband is captain of the Eagle now, Milner Barry, and 1 or 2 more that you don't know, but no one of much interest really. I am hoping to be able to play a little golf occasionally, as the courses here are lovely, but I shan't be able to join any of the other clubs, or the nightlife, which still seems to go on as though there was no war. I'm sure I shall be looked on as terribly sticky, but I can't help that, and in any case, even if I could afford it, I don't think I approve of it when we're at war. I wish I knew whether you had moved south or not. I am sending all my letters to Ch09, and I cabled to there on arrival, but I can't help hoping you are still up in Argyll. If this arrives about the time of Jane's birthday, will you give her my love and many happy returns, and explain why I can't send her a present, and please send as many snaps as you can from time to time, because it's all I have to live on. Incidentally, talking about living, when and if you are considering bringing the children out here, it may interest you to know that there are now no mosquitoes. No one even uses nets, and I haven't seen a fly yet. There appears to be plenty of fresh milk, fruit and vegetables, and dog is almost unknown. I got mine from the ship. There is really nothing you need to bring out except what you need for the voyage. God bless you, my darling, and all my love to you and the children. I presume we had moved south back to Ch09, where we stayed for 3 years. Molly returned initially to the caravan, but Jane and myself, when not at school, now slept in the house, though in the summer we sometimes had camp beds in the pagoda. We tried not to go to sleep until we had seen the first stars, led by Arcturus, and on a good night a meteor or two in the deepening dusk. At other times I remember sleeping in a tent alongside the caravan, which had then been moved to a flatter pitch. The sound of rain on the canvas was a new pleasure, which surprisingly started my love of camping. Those warm summer nights with the full moon rising over the hills to the east of us tutored my first love and understanding of astronomy. On the 18th and 23rd of May, Kenneth finished the original letter for the airmail via USA. I am quite recovered now and am taking over tomorrow. The school up country is apparently quite good and could take Jeremy as well as Jane if you felt you couldn't leave him behind. In the last resort, he could be sent to school in Australia, but that wouldn't be necessary except in the unlikely event of the UK being invaded whilst we were away. It doesn't seem all that hot. I think you'd find the voyage the worst part. It certainly seems beautifully cool to me after our CPR liner, which was built for the North Atlantic and had radiators but no fans. 23rd of May, 41. As you know by now, the ban is lifted except for Jeremy, and I do hope you're coming. You may have to pay the passage money originally, but I hope to get that back anyway later. I'm terribly excited and shan't sleep a wink till I get your cable, which I hope will say you're coming. The things you should bring are all the thin clothes you can lay your hands on, and certainly plenty for the voyage, remembering that laundry may not exist. You can get clothes made out here, of course. Evening clothes are necessary, and if it's still peaceful when you are here, we shall have to do a certain amount of entertaining. We want all the sheets and pillowcases and towels you can collect, and a few other things like table mats, ornaments and pictures are useful but not essential. All silver glass and cutlery is supplied. An electric iron is essential, and bring your wireless if you've still got it. Don't worry about cots and prams and things. We can manage to get something out here, I expect. Don't worry about money, but sell out what capital is necessary to pay your passage. Buy the necessary clothes and pay off our overdrafts. I shall stop your allotment as soon as I know you've started. You'd better take about £50 in travellers' cheques, and we can manage all right once we've settled in on my pay. I will arrange to remit Jeremy's school fees from here, but will you arrange with Bill to pay them to the school so that they get them regularly, and I will remit to Bill. All my love, treasure, and I pray to God you're coming and have a safe passage. Please cable from Cape Town, Ken. These early letters set the framework for many of the following letters. the uncertainties of whether they will arrive at all, and if they do, when and in what order. This topic, whether Molly would be allowed out to Singapore with all or some of us children, dominated Kenneth's letters home throughout the next month, as he imagined Molly with him in his marvellous house, escaping from the dangers and shortages of Britain for the peace and luxury of his privileged life in Singapore. We don't have Molly's replies, but we can infer that they were taking at least 8 weeks to reach Singapore. On the 21st of June, Kenneth received Molly's letters numbered 5, 6 and 7, the last of which had been posted on the 13th of April, while he was still on passage. If his letters were taking 6 weeks to reach the UK, that makes a total delay of up to 4 months. The frustration of decision-making must have been unbearable. In emergency, cables could be exchanged, but even they would seem dreadfully slow today when communications are virtually instantaneous. The cable which Kenneth sent from the first port of call on his voyage out, presumably somewhere in North America, on the 9th of April, had not reached Molly by 13th of April. On the 26th of May, Kenneth wrote, "I still haven't had a reply from you about coming out here. I expect you're having great difficulty in making up your mind. I do hope you won't decide to wait until after Jeremy's summer holiday, although I can quite understand that in peacetime that would be the ideal answer. Unfortunately, the ban here has only been lifted temporarily, and if you decide to wait, it may well be too late in September. I've thought of several more things you might bring out with you if you can manage them. Finger bowls, coffee cups and table mats. You should bring the pram if possible. Everyone uses old and disreputable ones out here, and it appears to be impossible to get second-hand ones. Also the cot and high chair, but I can get these later made if you haven't got them. However, don't let any of these things worry you, and if you'll just send me an AML letter before you sail, telling me any things you haven't got or would like me to arrange, I will do it all. I presume you'll want an Amar for Jonathan. At present I've only got a wash Amar at $10 a month. I think you should have one, because although you may have practically no household duties, you will have a certain amount of social ones. If you think you will get bored, I will arrange for an office job for you in the mornings only. I don't really think that's necessary though, or even desirable. The Chevys are being very kind to me. I had lunch and tea there yesterday, and am having supper with them tonight. Last night I went to my first party. Kenneth Scott brought a party of 5 and collected me here en route to Johor, where we dined with some old Shanghai friends of his, fabulously rich. The host is an architect, and had built himself this house in Johor, in Moorish Spanish style, and decorations are quite beyond me to describe. We dined in the patio, I suppose it's called, in an open courtyard on grass, with a marbled paved stream running across it, all floodlit from the top corners, and incense burning all round us. It really was most beautiful, almost as romantic as some of the courtyards in Venice. After dinner we all went on to the Johor Club, where we danced till about 1:15 a.m. The Sultan was there with his latest wife, and some Balinese girls. I mustn't write too much yet, or this letter will run over the 3 pages allowed, in the half-ounce. God bless you, treasure. I'm longing to get your calls. Pat Chevy says I ought to cable, "You are to come," but I think I must leave you the option. Good night, darling. I do love you so much. Molly had evidently decided that she wasn't going out to Singapore, though Kenneth didn't hear until the 1st of June. So sorry it's several days since I wrote. I've been in bed again with flu. I felt miserable on Tuesday evening, and on Wednesday went to bed with a temperature of 103 degrees. I'm afraid it hasn't quite gone down yet, and I'm still in bed, my 5th day today. It's a horrible climate to have a temperature in because one gets wet through every few minutes, and I must have lost nearly a stone in weight, I should think. However, I'm feeling better now and hope to get up a bit tomorrow. Unfortunately, your cable arrived when I was at my very worst. I was naturally thoroughly miserable, and wouldn't have minded in the least had I died that night. However, darling, that was only because of my flu. I entirely realized your feelings, and in my heart of hearts expected the answer I got, although I had hoped otherwise. Well, I still have hopes for these reasons. Firstly, it's no use waiting till next spring, because the ban is only lifted temporarily, and next spring is extremely doubtful. In addition, by next spring I shall only have 12 months more to do, so you wouldn't be allowed to come anyway. Secondly, your 3 years is a pessimistic outlook, because I have it in writing that they cannot keep me here more than 2 years altogether, and my predecessor got away on that agreement. There may of course be no ships by then, but that's a different matter. Thirdly, the ban has already gone up to 10 years, and I feel when I'm off my bed of sickness I may get up to 11, in which case I'll send another cable, and shall be able to tell you before I finish this letter, because the next clipper doesn't go for another 10 days. Incidentally, I must keep this down to 3 pages, so I'll stop now till I get more news. God bless you, sweetheart, and don't worry. I shall agree with your decision, whatever it is. Though he said he would agree with her decision, he was still arguing against it a few days later. Thursday, the 5th of June. I went back to work on Tuesday, although still feeling rather weak. I'm all right again now and played a game of golf this evening. I sent you another cable on Tuesday. The ban has not lifted to 11 yet, but the actual wording of the law is, children of over 10 are not allowed to remain. Well, there are 2 readings of that, and anyhow, I have put in a letter saying how ridiculous it is that you 3 should be kept in England because Jeremy may be 8 months too old. In any case, Jeremy will be allowed to remain a few weeks on a transit permit, which I will get, and then if I haven't worked it by then, he may have to go on to Australia to school. I am arranging that in case it's necessary, and can get him a lovely passage in charge of the captain in an empty trooper, I hope. Personally, I think we must stick together these days, and Australia seems almost next door out here, with aircraft 3 times a week in case you want to go to Jeremy, and mails 3 times a week too, taking only a few days. I'm certain it's right that you should all come, darling, and that we shall be terribly happy out here. But I shall quite understand if you refuse to come. You will have made your decision long before you get this letter, and I shan't blame you whatever it is. But please don't procrastinate, and think you will be able to come out in the spring, because I think it's 100 to 1 against that being possible. It may be possible if you wait till September, but I doubt even that. Again, on the 14th of June, he was still living in hope. I'm afraid my letters aren't as frequent as usual and are rather irregular, but it's awfully difficult when I know the letter is going to take about 2 months, and I sincerely hope you'll have left England by that time. Also, as I'm sending one every 14 days by clipper via America, all the news in these sea letters is bound to be a bit stale. I'm still awaiting a cable from you in reply to my second one asking you to bring Jeremy as well. I hope to goodness you come. I need you terribly badly here. I feel so lonely and out of it without you, and there are so many people and things I dislike here that I'd love to discuss with you. There'd seem a joke if you were here, but without you everything seems to be fighting against me. No one seems to realize there's a war on, and I'm expected to be social with people I've no wish to meet. Partly I hate to see people doing nothing but enjoy themselves when all at home is ruin, and partly I'm jealous because I feel so out of it, and you know how surly and unpleasant I get when I feel out of it. I'm sorry, darling. If you're still at home, this grouse will only make you feel remorse. And if you're on your way out, it isn't necessary. And in any case, things aren't really so bad. Most of the time I enjoy myself, and I've got enough work to keep me busy, although it is such stupid work. The Chevaliers are marvellous, and I spend about half my time with them. I've played tennis with him and various others 3 times this week, and he's most encouraging about my tennis, and has asked me to play again. Also twice this week I've been to the pictures in Singapore with the Harknesses, who, as you know, are sharing the house with me. The cinemas in Singapore are all air-conditioned, and coming out feels so funny. They finish about 11:30 p.m, and as you walk out into the street, it feels as though several radiators have been turned on. Last night we saw Ginger Rogers in Kitty Foyle. It was marvellous, and her acting absolutely first class. Today I've been playing golf with the Admiral, and have played abominably, hence my rather bad temper. But oh, my treasure, how I long for you to come out and help me. Finally, on the 19th of June, Kenneth wrote an almost despairing letter, when he seems to have realised that his dreams of Molly joining him would not be realised. My darling, I had your second cable a couple of days ago, and I hardly know what to say. At first I was completely knocked over, and the whole light seemed to go out of life. I'd spent the last week or 2 seeing everything here in the light of your eventual arrival. I mean, I'd thought how nice this and that would be when you came, and how you would like this person and hate that, and life seemed good. When your cable arrived, the whole of my card house collapsed, and it really seemed as though it wasn't worth going on. However, I know I've got to plod on, although it'll be 2 years of life wasted, instead of probably the 2 happiest years we'd ever had, which I think it would be if you came, because I realise now that you'll never come if you don't come this summer. Forgive this, treasure, but you realise how terribly disappointed I am. On the other hand, I know the difficulties must appear almost insurmountable to you, and the dangers pretty large. I don't agree with any of your reasons for not coming, except with regard to Jeremy. I think it would be a shame to take him away from St. Andrews, and I realise you can't leave him alone. On the other hand, England is a pretty dangerous place, and schools in Australia are very good. With regard to the rest, the money doesn't count 1 fig. The risk is always ours, even in peacetime. The risk of being torpedoed is about 1 in 300, and I should imagine far less than the risk you run by staying in England. The climate here is almost perfect, and the school for Jane very good. However, my darling, I realise you've weighed all these things up, that to you they look quite different, and that nothing on earth will persuade you to come out, and I will try to grin and bear it. I find the social life here will be almost impossible to avoid. These earlier letters throughout May and June have already touched on the social life, the party with the Sultan of Johore, golf with the Admiral Drew, outings with the Harknesses, and above all, the friendship and support of the Chevaliers. The same letter of the 14th of June continues the next day, a Sunday, with more details of the social life, as well as more evidence of ill health, that to the modern reader looks, not surprisingly, like stress. I had one of my headaches last night, hence my rather miserable letter. I feel a bit doped with Vegenin at the moment, but the headache has gone. I've just been to church, to a little wooden church just newly built, and quite a nice little padre. I was very sorry for him this morning, as there were only 8 in the congregation apart from the choir, and yet we had a full service with 2 lessons and a sermon. Did I tell you I was trying to construct a golf course at the base? It's one of the few worthwhile jobs I may find to do, because it will fill a gap in the base here, as a great many people can't afford to join one of the 2 Singapore golf clubs, and even those who can usually only get there on weekends because both of work and of petrol rationing. There's a woman here, the wife of Captain Bell, who was captain of the Exeter in the plate battle. He's delightful. She does try awfully hard to be kind and helpful, and her house is always full of guests. But she's as tactless as can be, and she tries to run everyone and everything. She's round us now, running Mrs. Harkness. I'm afraid I shan't get on with the Harkness family if I have to live with them for many months. They're both very social and must know the right people and do the right thing, and people are asked to lunch and dinner practically every day. It makes me writhe to see all the gay life going on here, but I suppose I shall be drawn into the torrent before long. To some extent Kenneth was drawn into the torrent, but seems to have much preferred the company of the younger officers from the ships, and, in the absence of Molly, tried to avoid the colonial round of entertaining which characterized his older colleagues and their wives. I had one more night's bridge this last week. Harry Reid took me to the Tanglin Club to play with 2 Canadians. It was quite fun. We started at about 7 p.m, but by 9:30 I was beginning to get a little hungry, and eventually said that although I was only a guest, might I suggest we had some food. They had apparently forgotten about it, so about 10:15 we had our dinner. That is typical of this country. We were drawn into the Bells last night to a family supper party, which started food soon after 10 p.m. I pleaded my headache and came away to bed. I forgot to say that I made another $11 at bridge that night in the Tanglin, about 25 shillings. The 2 Canadians went on about midnight to a party with Betty Bryant, the Australian film star, who has come here for a first night of one of her films. I just met her on Friday night, and she seemed most delightful and quite unspoiled. She's only 19. Well, sweetheart, I'm afraid this is rather a depressing letter, but I trust you'll have left England, and so won't get it. I'm not really miserable. As you know, I have these fits, and writing to you always cheers the air and cheers me up. You are the most marvellous person on earth, darling, and I thank God for you every day. Let's hope this war finishes sometime, and we can be happy together again with the children. All my love, my darling, and to the children, Kenneth. The patronising reference to the Padre is presumably to the Reverend Lovell Pocock, whose book, For Those in Peril, has a lot of detail about the base church and Pocock's life as base chaplain at this time. The good news in the early letters mainly centred on the house and garden. In a letter dated the 24th of June, Kenneth wrote, I forgot to tell you in my first letter that my house is built on the highest part of the base. It is number 1 house, and all the others are built around it. My garden slopes away to the north and east, and from my bedroom and its veranda. I can see for many miles in every direction, from northwest over the Johor Straits, right round through north and east to the south behind the house. True, it is mostly rubber plantation, except for the dockyard, glimpses of which I get to the northwest, but it's a lovely view. In a much later letter, the 18th of October, Kenneth describes sitting out in the garden for his early morning tea, though not his breakfast because it's usually pretty hot by 8 a.m, and we have very little shade except at the back, which is all kitchen garden and boys' quarters, and at places rather too far from the house for convenience of serving. So I sit out there from 7 to 7:45 and read the paper, and then go in and have my bath and breakfast. To a first approximation, the sun at 8 a.m. would be on the front of the house at a glancing angle of about 15 degrees, so it would be getting pretty hot. This confirms, if confirmation were needed, that C.D.'s official residence in 1941 was the house later known as 128 Kings Avenue. On a visit in 2007, we were confused at first because the 1968 plan of the dockyard area has 118 King's Avenue marked as Captain of the Dockyard, while 128 is marked Commodore. However, Rear Admiral T.B. Drew, Commodore Malaya, lived in Admiralty House, an even more magnificent residence on an isolated 50-foot hill on Nelson Road, some 1,500 yards to the southwest of, and quite separate from, the block of senior officers' housing ringed by King's and Queen's Avenues. When Admiral Sir Geoffrey Layton arrived as Commander-in-Chief, he lived in Beaulieu House, on the waterfront immediately to the east of the dockyard, in full view of comings and goings in the dockyard, and with its own jetty onto the Straits of Johore. We now know that number 128 must have been Kenneth's house, chiefly from the orientation of the house in the plan he enclosed with his first letter. Number 128 faces roughly northeast, while Kenneth has the house facing north on his plan, which is a good approximation if one imagines the dockyard facing directly across the Straits of Johore. In fact, the north shore of the island of Singapore is gently curved, and in the dockyard area faces roughly north-northeast rather than north. On his arrival, Kenneth is not likely to have examined a plan closely. For all practical purposes, the house faces roughly north. The house was still standing in 2007, as were most of the other senior officers' houses of those days, on higher ground about half a mile from the centre of the old dockyard. As we have seen, Kenneth's first visitors and nearest neighbours were Chevy and Pat Chevalier. From the description of the gap in the hedge and Kenneth's sketch, it is evident that the Chevalier's house was that which is now numbered 143 King's Avenue. Other neighbours are mentioned in the later letters, but I haven't been able to establish where they actually lived. For instance, in July Kenneth dined with his next-door neighbours, an old engineer captain called Ch09 and his wife, and in August he was playing golf with Mrs. Bailey, who was the wife of the Commander E, who lived next door, and tennis on the dockyard courts with the civil secretary and his wife, who also lived next door. The civil secretary, G. Hayworth Esquire, the senior civil servant in the dockyard, ranked, I believe, with the Admiral, so perhaps lived in the house now numbered 118. Since there were, and still were in 1968 and possibly later, 3 other houses as close as the Chevaliers, and at least another half-dozen within the loop of King's and Queen's Avenues, it is not surprising that CD had a number of next doors. Captain E. Ch09 may have been chief engineer in May 1941, to be replaced in September by Captain E. R. P. Chapman, and there were 2 assistant chief engineers, Commanders E. G. F. Blythe and G. L. Bailey. The Blythes lived at 18 Queen's Avenue, and from contemporary photos of children playing in the gardens, it is tempting to deduce that H. E. Newnham, the chief constructor, lived at 16 Queen's Avenue. We can also deduce that the Baileys and the Chevaliers lived very close by, and that all these families probably lived in the row of large houses now numbered from 141 Queen's Avenue down to perhaps 133, with the Baileys and Blythes perhaps in numbers 141 and 143. This is sheer guesswork. On the 20th of May, a Tuesday, Kenneth started his job as Captain of Dockyard, Deputy Superintendent and King's Harbour Master, some 10 weeks after being appointed. The absence of his family is clearly telling, and to his sister Violet he even says, on the 17th of May, "Yes, I agree with you that it was a great pity I was ever promoted. I had such an interesting job in London besides the chance of seeing my family from time to time and being able to look after them in an emergency. My present job is not the slightest interest to me and doesn't even need a naval training to carry it out. Almost entirely it consists of supervising native labour and being chief of police and administering a small and very mixed town. A retired rubber planter co-opted locally and made a Captain RNVR could do it much better. The themes of the house and garden and the neighbours continue through the following months. Our Kenghwas were out last night. They flower once every 3 years, in China, sometimes more often here, for 1 night only, and are a wonderful sight. I have 7 blossoms, rather like enormous cream water lilies, about 10 inches in diameter and growing like cacti off the side of the leaves of a thing that looks rather like an overgrown aspidistra. The Chinese say it's extremely lucky when they flower, so I'm hoping. In the absence of anything else to write about, and apart from the family dilemma, Kenneth's letters mainly detail his sporting activities, which he loved, and entertaining, which he purported to hate. As early as his first weekend, he was playing golf and tennis. CD's house, Tuesday, the 20th of May. I played golf with Love Band on Sunday. We couldn't go till about 4 p.m. and didn't manage to get in 18 holes, but it really was lovely out in Bukit Timah. On Sunday they have a band which plays on the 18th green from 6:30 till 8 p.m. and all the populace gathers at small tables on an enormous veranda in front of the clubhouse under the stars and listens to the music and drinks stingers. You know how lovely tropical evenings are? It really is heavenly, and you'll be sharing it with me soon. At present I am sitting on my own veranda. I took over the house today. With the night all round me and continuous sound of cicadas, with the veranda to right and left of me lit by Chinese lanterns, and a lovely cool breeze making everything just perfect, except that you aren't here yet. I played tennis this evening for the first time. Chevy insisted and lent me one of his rackets. I played with him against Love Band and a planter whose name I don't know, at a little planters' club at the village of Serembang, about 3 miles away. The planter was nearly down to my standard, but the others were much better. However, I didn't disgrace them, and Chevy and I won the last 2 sets. Anyhow, I enjoyed it very much. For the first month or so, golf seems to have been favoured. On the 9th of June, he had his first game of bridge in the colony. About 4 nights ago, and my luck certainly held then, I won every rubber and finished up $13.20 to the good, about 32 shillings. I'm being taken to the Shanghai Club tonight to play some really superior bridge. I've just had a grand weekend. Colonel Ashton, who travelled out with me, came and stayed the weekend. We played golf on Saturday afternoon and 36 holes on Sunday. Most people consider 9 holes a day quite enough out here. However, we started playing at 8:45 a.m, finished around 11:15 and had a light lunch in the clubhouse of curry puffs and hard-boiled eggs. We then snoozed over tattlers and things until 2 p.m, when we went out for our second round, which we finished around 4:30, just when most people were starting their day's golf. Petrol rationing is so severe here that we couldn't afford to go home to lunch, otherwise we would have had a much longer siesta. My petrol allowance just about allows me to go backwards and forwards to the office 5 miles a day, into Singapore about twice a month, and to Bukit Timah for golf about twice a week if I'm lucky. Of course, one can sometimes get a lift. On the 14th of June he wrote that he'd been playing golf with the Admiral and had played abominably, hence a rather bad temper. Through the second half of June and July, Kenneth's letters were long and prolific. 19 letters, more than 20,000 words. Golf and bridge feature regularly, with some tennis. We can deduce that he was only intermittently busy with his various duties at work, which were entirely administrative or social. His letter of the 20th of June includes all these elements, as well as the nostalgia for his absent wife. As I wrote that, some more people came to call. Then I had to go out as head ARP warden during a blackout exercise, after which 2 more came to a late dinner and so to bed, and I couldn't finish this letter. Hundreds of most interesting people continue to call. Never a day goes past without some, and I haven't returned any of theirs yet. I was going to wait for you to do it for me, or with me, but now I shall have to get some more cards printed and spend a couple of months returning them. We've had 2 days ARP exercise, including 2 nights of what we call here brownout, which means a partial blackout, which can be maintained indefinitely. It's impossible to black out completely here because of the climate and the construction of the houses. We brown out, and then when there's a warning all the lights go out. My duties during this exercise include trying to make the residents take it seriously, and my goodness it's difficult. Lots of the junior dockyard officials consider it's too much trouble to pay attention to ARP, and of course we can't order them to do anything. I wish they were under the Naval Discipline Act. Alternatively, I wish they could be sent to a really badly bombed area in England to make them realise there is a war on. However, it's almost impossible out here to make anyone realise it. On Wednesday, during his intensive exercise, I was bidden to lunch with the governor and to dinner with the C&C. What can one do? I enjoyed both meals, and both are charming, but it's not war. I'm afraid we shall get an awful shock sometime, and now you're not coming, the sooner it's over the better I shall be pleased. Later. I've been sitting on a board of inquiry for the last 48 hours, listening to conflicting evidence for hour after hour, and so I'm pretty well worn out. What I wrote earlier today was written before breakfast, and it's now 5:30 p.m, and I've just come from the inquiry. I've got to dine out again tonight, with the Rear Admiral Malaya, my immediate boss. I hope I feel a little less tired when I've had a bath. Saturday, the 21st. I'm not quite sure whether I had received your 3 letters, numbers 2, 3 and 4, before I wrote my last airmail letter, but I think I must have done, as I got them on June the 6th. I have written 2 letters since then, 16 and 17, but have sent them by sea. Anyhow, thank you so much. As you know, I live for your letters when I can't have you, and unlike my miserable effusions, they are always so marvellously cheerful. I hope to get some golf this weekend and some more tennis next week, because I've had no exercise at all this week, owing to the press of work and social entertainment. I don't believe I ever told you that last Saturday I played golf in a 4-ball with the Admiral, the General, one of them, and another army officer. It's a 4-ball they have every Saturday and usually consists of the Admiral, the GOC and the AOC and the captain of the club, Navy, Army, RAF and club. But when anyone is sick or away they rope in people like me. It was quite fun, but I played incredibly badly. However, I've been bidden to play in a return tomorrow. I'm rather letting the gardening and house decorations slide now, because it doesn't seem worthwhile. However, Mrs. Harkness is going to continue living here now, with her husband and child of course, and she is taking over the house and getting it redecorated, and the chairs and cushions recovered and so on. I'm afraid I can't be cheerful today. I'm sorry, Treasure, I love you so much and do want you, but I also realise I'm making it very difficult for you by rubbing it in. So perhaps I'd better stop and finish this off during the weekend. Au revoir, sweetheart. June became July with little change. A routine of tennis, golf, bridge, and on Sundays, church, where it seems Kenneth was ex officio church warden. On Sunday, the 29th of June, Kenneth wrote, I'm taking a Sunday morning off and nothing to do, so here I am. Usually I have a whole day's golf on alternate Sundays, starting to play at about 9 a.m, and on the intervening Sundays I do my duty and go to church. We only have matins on the first and third Sundays in every month, so it fits in very well. Unfortunately, this is the 5th Sunday this month, so there is no service and no golf. However, I went to early service, and at about 11:30 I'm going to take Mrs. Harkness and her daughter along to our swimming club. That's the one in the base, not in Singapore. After which we've got a curry tiffin party. In other words, I've got a lot of my duty guests coming to lunch. I've been doing my duty nobly this week. I had 6 of my staff to dinner on Thursday and played rummy with them afterwards. 3 married couples, all quite nice. On Friday, I had 7 Dutchmen, or women, to dinner. Or rather, Harkness and I did between us, and today I've got 6 stockyard people to lunch. The usual curry tiffin parties here are large. People ask about 30 guests, and the curry is put out on the dining room table. Every conceivable kind of curry and additions, and an enormous bowl of rice in the middle. Everyone goes and helps themselves, and eats it on the verandas, on the chairs and poufs, or even the floor. Curry here is always followed by that lovely dish called something like gula melaka, a sort of tapioca covered with cream, and the black sugary sauce which gives its name to the dish. It is most soothing. I'd forgotten all about it. I've also managed to get in some tennis this week and a lovely game of golf yesterday. I wish you knew Bukit Timah. I can't explain the beauty of it to you, with all its green and its lakes and marvellous flowers round the clubhouse where one sits after the game and watches what are always the most lovely sunsets, while flying foxes pass slowly overhead instead of aeroplanes. And the war seems not only thousands of miles, but thousands of years away. I'd love to share it all with you, and I always imagine you sitting there with us, and how lovely it'll be when you do come. Incidentally, I'm quite converted to your point of view now, or rather I see completely why you won't come out, and I'm very sorry I must have made it harder for you by writing so much trying to persuade you to come. I love it, but I know it isn't really suitable for the children, and especially Jeremy, when he's doing so well at school, and the trip would be terrible too. The weather is hotter here than usual at present, and we've had no rain for 4 weeks, which is almost unheard of. But I'm thriving on it and love the heat, and have a beautifully cool office, so that even when working I don't feel it. On Wednesday I dined with Gerald Skay and his New Zealand bride. She is entirely charming, and she's 33, a year older than he is, but doesn't look it. She was at school with Justin Gladstone, and is a great friend of their family. We met Gerald Skay and Justin, wife of Gerald Gladstone, in Chapter 3 on the World Cruise in 1924. Kenneth's letter of the 29th of June continued. It seems silly writing all my news when in about a week's time I shall be writing an airmail letter which I hope will reach you at least a month before this does. However, I know you would like some sea-mail letters to fill in the gaps. I know I should be very upset if you only wrote to me once a fortnight, although I'm hoping you'll send me occasional airmail letters. I had a very pleasant surprise this week in the shape of an income tax rebate of about £13, which was overcharged last year. Actually sharing the house and only paying income tax on my last year's pay, as a commander, I am very well off this year, and ought to be able to save quite a lot. The blow, of course, will come the year I get home, when I shall be paying income tax on the pay I get out here, which is very nearly twice what I would get in an ordinary job at home. In fact, if the tax remains at 10 shillings in the pound, I shall probably get no pay at all in 1943. So I'll try and save a few hundred now. Incidentally, my bridge is helping, although I refuse to go to the club. I made another $12 last night, bringing my month's earnings up to just over $40, about £5. I'm enclosing Violet's and Anthony's letters. I think the latter will amuse you a lot. God bless you, my sweetheart. All my love to you and the children. XXX, Kenneth. On the 3rd of July, which he seems to have forgotten was the day after Jane's 8th birthday, Kenneth wrote another long letter, which opened. I'm longing to get some more letters from you. The gaps seem so horribly long. It's nearly 3 weeks since I had your last one. They do cheer me up beyond belief, and for a few days I feel that all is well, and then I begin to get depressed again and long to cable to you to come out whatever the consequences. They've taken the ban off all children now, and even off fiancés, but I'm afraid you won't leave Jeremy, and I don't think we should be justified in bringing him out here unless we intend making an Australian of him. We might do worse, of course, as they'll certainly need a lot more English immigrants there after the war. Don't you think Jeremy would make a nice, tough little Australian? Other news was of dinner and bridge with the skis, and Harry Reid. Gerald's ski is still in rubber, which is going through a bad time, and he has very little money, and she, Betty Ski, works in an RAF office, both morning and afternoon, for $100 a month, about £12. Kenneth felt really ashamed of his luck at bridge, in taking $10, 25 shillings or £1.25, each off the impoverished skis, though he comments, "Luckily we didn't play at the usual Singapore stakes, which are 20 or 25 cents. That would have represented a week's earnings for the unfortunate Betty." Then followed a paragraph about his day job, which explains his boredom and frustration. I don't really think anything else has happened lately. I sit in my office from 8:30 in the morning till 1 p.m, and from 2:15 till about 4:30, and sign my name hundreds of times and deal with dozens of different subjects, not one of which is of the slightest interest to me. Such varied subjects as cleaning old coolie line latrines, burial of corpses after air raids, food for the dockyard labourers, promotions and dismissals of Indian police, composition and manning of the dockyard fire brigade, blackout of houses during air raids, and many other more confidential matters of a similar type. Can you imagine me taking much interest in them? Despite the last question, and the fact that there were no corpses, nor air raids, we can be sure that he was fully conscious that these preparations had to be made. And despite nothing else having happened, he did think of some more news. The garden was suffering from lack of rain. The golf course was getting terribly hard. Even I can drive about 300 yards. The greens are almost unstoppable on. And he had just read Nanking Road by Vicky Baum, while still reading The History of Europe in fairly small doses. Later he reported his first game of squash since his arrival in Singapore. He found it hot, but thought it just as well to get a little exercise every day. He was also trying to get his tennis court into commission. "I've got a net, but no surrounding yet. Fish netting doesn't last in this country, and even wire netting is rationed, or reserved for the services, but I think I can manage something. Mrs. Harkness is very keen and quite good. She and I have played once or twice with Chevy and one other, but of course Chevy is much too good for any of us really. Anyhow, I'll have the court ready for you when you come out, and we'll teach Jane. I've also got approval to start building the golf course in the base. Or rather, I've got it from the Admiral. It only wants Admiralty blessing now. So there'll be somewhere close to play golf too, and lots of caddies." Still the hopes of Molly joining him linger on, despite the immersion in enthusiastic sport and further reluctant socializing, and a job which bored him and which he felt didn't suit him.